Blues time, ladies and gentlemen, right here on our stage. Before rock, before jazz, before R&B, there was blues. It's been around a lot longer than any of those other styles, but blues sounds just as fresh today as it did when it was being born. Hello, my name is Keith Wyatt, and I'd like to welcome you to the Ultimate Beginner Series for Blues Guitar, Step 1. Whether you're a beginning player looking for new styles to explore, or a player who just wants to get back to the roots, we're going to spend the next half hour or so with the blues. I want to remind you at this time that if the basic guitar playing skills I refer to in this video are completely new to you, you might want to check out the Ultimate Beginner Series Guitar Basics Steps 1 and 2, where I get you started with the chords and scales we'll be using here. The only other thing you'll need is a guitar that's in tune with mine, so let's start out by tuning your high E string to my high E string. Okay, I'm going to go through the strings one at a time, and you tune up as we go. All right, here's high E. Here's B. And G. Now we'll go to D. A. And the low E. Now if you need to, you can stop the tape and tune up before we get going, because you're going to need to be in tune, all right? And when you're ready, turn the machine back on. Let's get down to it. To help you get the most out of this video, we're going to use something called tablature. At the bottom of the screen, you're going to see 6 lines, and they represent the 6 strings of your guitar. The top line is like the top string of your guitar. The bottom line is like the bottom string. It's almost like you're holding your guitar and looking at it like this. And on the 6 strings, you're going to see numbers. The numbers represent frets, and that'll go for chords if I play a chord. The numbers tell you that 7th fret, 6th fret, 5th fret, and so on. And if I play a scale, same thing. So between watching my fingers and seeing the numbers, you got it made. There are 3 basic elements to any style of music, and that includes blues. The 3 elements are harmony, melody, and rhythm. The place we're going to start playing blues is with the rhythm, because that's the driving force behind the style. And as you'll find out, you can play some pretty good stuff with even 1 note or 1 chord if the rhythm is right. In blues, the basic rhythm is called the 8th note triplet shuffle. Now, just to back up a little bit, the basic beat in most styles of music is called the quarter note, and it has that name because there are 4 of them in a complete measure. I'm going to put my guitar down here for a second so we can talk about this stuff. Now, quarter notes, you just snap your finger, clap your hand, tap your foot, and that's where you get the feel of the beat. It's a very natural thing, right? Now you take 4 of them in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. There's your measure. Now if you play 2 notes for each one of these quarter notes, they're called 8th notes. All right, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Those are 8th notes. If you play 3 notes in one beat, we call it a triplet or an 8th note triplet. Very even. Now a triplet shuffle is when you play only the first and last notes of the triplet, And it feels kind of relaxed and lopsided, like you're shuffling down the street. It sounds like this. Here's the triplet again. And playing only the first and last. Right? Get that feeling? Already you can start to move to it, right? Now compare that to the straight eighth note. Here's the straight eighth note and the shuffle. It's so relaxed, right? Now once you start to feel it, you can move with it, you can kind of sing it. Da, 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 da. You get that groove going, pick up your guitar and play the, oh yeah. Right? It doesn't take much, does it, right? It sort of feels kind of that blues mood already, you know. Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, they kind of built careers around not much more than this right here, you know. Put a little attitude on top, right? Now I'm just playing that one string there. I'm using the pick, of course, playing all down strokes. Now even something as simple as this, there's a little bit of technique to it. And what it is, every time there's a downbeat, I'm accenting with the pick. Listen. You hear that? And I'm also muting with the heel of my right hand. I'm deadening the string so it sounds nice and percussive. Right? Now the next thing I'm going to do is add some harmony. And to make harmony, all you need to do is put another note together with that one. And there's your chord. It's a simple chord, but that's a chord nonetheless. One finger, I'm playing B on the fifth string. So I have E and B together. Some people call that a power chord. In blues, I don't know what you call it. Let's just call it an E chord. Right? Now your finger can also hang over on the E on the fourth string. Now you have a three-note chord. Get that same groove going. Remember your accent. Now we're going to add a note to that to make a pattern. Now the note I'm adding is C sharp. It's at the fourth fret on the fifth string. In relation to the E chord itself, the root E, it's the sixth note. The B is the fifth, the C sharp is the sixth. So I'm going from the fifth to the sixth. Right? And there's my pattern. Still keep accenting in the same way. Now to make it hip, I can use a little upstroke now and again, so I can get the high E and the B there together. Now I got a complete pattern. You can take the exact same shape, move it over to A. Right. Now I've got the open A string. Got my finger on the E and the A together. It's a bar. And I add, at the fourth fret on the fourth string, the F sharp. There's my upstroke. Go back to E. Oh yeah. Now there's one more chord you can play in the open position, that's D. The D is a little different. The reason is because of the tuning of the third and second strings. You have to use a slightly different shape. So what I'm going to do here is play the two notes together, open D, the A, add the B, and then instead of using a bar with my index finger, I use my second finger here. All right, so. Now E, it's blues time. It's that simple, right? So we got three chords, we got a little rhythm here. It's happening. Now, you want to play in other keys or you want to be able to move around the neck a little bit, you have to use bar chords. So we'll take those same three chords, A, D, and E, and move them up to fifth position. This is where most people wind up playing this most of the time anyway. Same basic principle. You get the root of the chord, the fifth of the chord, and with the third finger I can bar across two strings. Now I have to reach up with my fourth finger. It's a little bit more of a stretch. Now if I want to play D, shift over to the 5th string, right? You have to be careful with the right hand now because the tendency is going to be to want to hit that low string. You don't want to do that, so you deaden the low string with the tip of your finger. My right hand is still kind of tight here. Back to A. Now E is up at the 7th position. There's the E chord. There's the added note. Well, now that we got 3 chords in a pocket, we need somewhere to use it. And what we're going to do is play what we've just learned over the 12-bar progression. This is the most common progression by far in blues. And the 3 chords that we're playing, the A chord, D, and the E, all happen to belong together in one key. And the key, of course, is the key of A. In the key of A, the A chord, logically enough, is called the 1 chord. It's the tonic chord, based on the 1st note of the scale. Now, when you go up to the 4th note of the scale, that's D. So we call that the 4 chord. And then, of course, E is right next door. That's the 5 chord. And 1, 4, 5, arranged in the 12-bar progression, is the foundation of the style that we play today that we call blues. Now, here's the way it works. You're going to play 4 bars on the 1 chord. We'll use our little rhythm pattern here to get started. All right. There's bar 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to shift over to the 4 chord. 2 bars on the 4 chord. There's the 2nd bar. Back to 1. Stay in time. Now we go to 5. And then back to 4. And then around to 1. And then up to 5. And then the whole thing starts all over again. It's an endlessly recycling progression. There are some variations that you run into, and we'll get into some of those later on in this video and in step 2. First thing I want to show you is the way that people usually handle the 5 chord at the end. Instead of playing a full bar of 5, there's a little variation people use. 5 chord, 4 chord, here's the 1. That's the sound that you hear most often on almost every blues record. Now what I did there is I actually hang on to the 1 chord for 1 extra beat. 5, 4, and instead of a bar of 1 and a bar of 5, 1, 2, and, right? So what I did is I hung onto the 1 chord and then slid down into the 5 chord, and this requires a new chord. Now in the beginner series, step 2, I showed you dominant chords, dominant 7th chords. Here's a 9th chord. And the reason it's called a 9th chord is it contains an extra note, which is called the 9th. And I don't want to get too far into theory land right now, so I'm just going to show you the chord and leave it at that. This is an E dominant 9th chord, and you're going to see this diagram on your screen as we go here. 2nd finger on the E, 1st finger on the 4th string at the 6th fret, and then it's very simple. Your 3rd finger will bar all the top 3 strings. Right? Got to get a lot of pressure down on the 3rd finger there, almost bend it backwards a bit to make it really work. And you want to get the highest note in there as well. So we slide down from above, F9 to E9. So once again, 5 chord, 4 chord, and here we go. 1, 2, and. Then we'll start the top of the progression again. So that's the standard blues turnaround. Now it's called a turnaround because you're getting ready to turn around and go back to the start of the tune again, right? So it makes sense. Now we've got a groove, we've got a little chord pattern here, we've got a turnaround, we've got a 12-bar progression. Let's talk about some other ways to play rhythm. The one that I just showed you is probably the fundamental rhythm groove that guitar players have played for as long as the style's been around. But when you have more than one guitar, 2 guitars playing together, Usually you'll have one guitar playing that, and then the second guitar has to do something different. Or if you're playing on a tune, you don't want to do the same thing all the time. You need some variations. So I'll show you a couple of real common variations. Now, one is to take the chord that I showed you in step 2 there, the dominant chord, big fat bar chord, all across the 6 strings, and you play a little pattern. Instead of playing a constant beat, what you do is play some accents. It goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. For the 4 chord, we're using a D9, same as the E, but based on D. And then E, D, and here's the turnaround. Right? Very simple little pattern. One thing you want to notice is I keep my right hand going the whole time. That's my groove. That's my metronome right there. I'm playing the shuffle against the strings. And then I control the groove with my left hand. Where I press the fingers down is where the chord starts, and when I lift the fingers up, that's when the chord stops. That's where you get your pattern, all right? Now, I'm going to show you a couple more, and then we're going to go and try this stuff out with the band, so hang on for a second here. Here's another one. Right, now that's authentic blues rhythm phrasing right there. This is based on a lot of different players that you hear throughout the history of blues. Now what I'm actually doing is starting with what looks like an A minor triad and then hammering on with my second finger. See that move there? Right? Hold the third finger down as you do that. So you're hearing the full chord with the note hammered on. Right? Now what I do is pick the downstroke on the A, then a downstroke on the hammer-on, another downstroke on A, fold my third finger over, and then come back to the hammer-on. Now for D, instead of staying in this position, I'm going to move up to where the D chord is located, based on the same shape. And then back to A. And then up to the E chord, D, and then A. And the turnaround, right? Now you can do little variations on that kind of a thing as well. Here's another variation I kind of like. Instead of hammering on, you can go like, you can slide into the shape. And in this case, you take your first finger, second finger, slide them up a fret. Third finger. One more variation here. This is the stuff. I'm giving you the real thing right here. Check it out, right? Right, now that's a little tricky move there. You start out the same as we did already. And then you have to shift your entire hand up to the 7th position. First finger, third finger, second finger, right? That's still an A7 chord, but it's a little bit different. And then with the third finger again, barring, and then back to that hammer-on. That move is going to take a little while to get down. You have to work on the shift so that you're making your connection very smooth. Up to D. E. Now we're only going to do half. That's the hip way, right? You split that phrase in half and play half on the E chord, and then you play the second half of the phrase on the D chord, and back to A. And the turnaround, all right? So now in the space of a couple of minutes, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways to play rhythm on a medium shuffle. It's happening. There's only one thing left to do. Let's go play with the band. Right now we're going to go join Roscoe Beck and John Bishop playing the same patterns that I just showed you. And what you're going to see on the screen is me playing the basic shuffle pattern, first thing I showed you, and then through the magic of video technology, I'm going to play along with myself and play each one of the variations that I just explained to you. And you have a choice. You can play along with me, you can play the basic part, you can try one of the other parts while I'm playing a separate part. It's up to you, really. Just have some fun with it, okay? And this will give you a chance to feel what it's like to play with a great rhythm section. All right, check it out. Well, now it's definitely blues time. Since we already have a groove and we got some chords, we're ready to talk about the third part of music, which is melody, in this case soloing, blues soloing. Look around here at these guys, looks like every one of them is in the midst of getting down, taking care of business, probably using the scale I'm about to show you right here. Now, in the basic step 2, I showed you the pentatonic scale, and that's the basic sound that we're still going to use. We're going to start to add things to it and make it sound more specifically bluesy, but that's kind of the starting point. So once again, just to review quickly, key of A, the guitar player's key, starting in 5th position on the top string. With my first finger, I play the A, 4th finger, just follow along with me, watch that tab too. 3rd finger, 1st finger, right on down through the scale. Very easy to play. Your first finger is always there as a reference, right? You keep coming back to that first finger. That's what makes this pattern so special for guitar players. Now to make it a little bit bluesier, we're going to add a note to it, starting again at the top. Here's the note. With your 4th finger. Now that's called the flat 5. Now that note, you just play it one time, it sounds bluesy. What can you say? They call that a blue note. And that's kind of one of the things that makes blues sound the way it does. You hear little phrases. And of course you can add it to the lower octave as well. There's the 5th, flat 5, 4th. So there's our basic blues scale pattern. Now if you want to, you can stop the tape and just kind of run your fingers around that pattern a little bit. Get your fingers used to the shape and get used to adding in that note, because we're going to be using that a bit as we go along. I'm going to show you 2 little extensions onto that basic pattern that give you a little bit more room to move and allow you to cover most of the sounds that you hear, like the greats using. They work out of this pattern, almost all of them. First of all, instead of stopping on the low A there, we're going to go down 2 frets to G. And you get this little, what they call a box shape down here. First finger, third finger. There's the G, the A. Then we get the C instead of up here. We get it here, and then the D there. So as you come down the scale, and then you can add that flat 5 again. So it kind of gives you a way to play in the lower octave and get down to it in that position. Moving back up, all you have to do is shift up, and you're back in position. And now we're going to add something onto the top. Moving up to the next spot, we're at the 10th fret now, and come back down again. And you get a little position right here, which is one of the most common and most useful positions. You can bend from it. Now there's that flat 5 again. Right? And now, as you just saw, we have 3 octaves in which we can play almost any blues lick you want to hear. One thing guitar players love to do is learn new patterns and work things out all over the neck. And that's cool, but in blues you don't really need to do that as much as you might want to do it in other styles, because if you can find a good melody, usually it sticks within about 1 octave. And then all you can have to do is move it down 2 frets, move it up 2 frets, and you got it. So these are our 3 basic positions that we're going to be using. And from this point on, once you got the basic technique, it's all phrasing. So let's take a few minutes and talk about that. Now the essence of blues soloing is phrasing. It's taking those few notes that we just looked at and making them sound like music. You know, a comparison that I use a lot is between playing blues and playing a game like chess, for instance. Chess is pretty simple when you think about it. There's only a couple of moves. You can memorize it in about 15 minutes. But then you can spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what to do with it, you know. It's kind of the same way with blues. You got a 5-note scale, add in that flat 5, right? And then you spend next 20, 30, 40 years trying to figure out how to make it work, you know, and that's phrasing. So phrasing, when guitar players talk about phrasing, the most common term that people use is licks. And that's a good thing, and it's also kind of a dangerous thing. We're going to talk about licks in a second. The whole point of phrasing is to make you sound more like a singer. Blues kind of was invented by singers, people singing about their lives, you know, things that were going on, important things. And when you sing something, you're going to tend to focus more on the important notes. You're not going to sing scales. You're going to sing melodies. So the whole goal of this this section right here is to talk about how to get your guitar playing to sound more like you're singing. And one of the keys is to learn how to breathe, and not only what to play, but what not to play. All right? Now I mentioned licks. What is a lick? A lick is a short, rhythmic, repeatable, melodic phrase. It has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Now, basically, it's a couple of well-played notes with a nice rhythm. I'm going to play a lick for you right here, okay? Using the blues scale. Right. Now that has a beginning, has a little pause in the middle, and then it has an ending. And it fits into the rhythm. You can kind of feel that beat. Play with me, would you? That's pretty easy to play, and nothing tricky in the technique at all, really. But it sounds nice. Now, what is it that makes it work? Well, there's a couple of things going on there. One is the rhythm. Da, 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 da. It has a nice natural feel to it. With that pause in the middle, it kind of makes it feel like you're saying something. taking a breath, and then completing the idea. That's the essence of phrasing. Also, it rhythmically fits into the groove in a nice way, right? Now, there are no real hard and fast rules about what beat to start on, what note to start on. The only way to really learn phrasing is to listen to people that know how to phrase and copy. And over time, your own style will start to come out of that, all right? But I'm going to show you some of the basic techniques that people use. First of all, back in the basic step 2, I talked about hammer-ons. Now, this is something all guitar players use. It's a way of blending the notes together a little bit. So, for instance, I'm picking every note here. And I'm using all downstrokes. In blues, as a rule, you don't have to worry too much about tricky right-hand technique. Downstrokes work most of the time. One thing I'm going to do to kind of change it a bit is instead of picking all those notes, I'm going to pick this note, pull off, hammer on. You hear the difference? Kind of changes the way the notes flow together. Smooths it out a little bit. Now check this out. Instead of picking the flat 5, I'm going to hammer on from the 4th. I get. Starts to get a little bit more bluesy when you just add that one little subtlety in there. Now what about something like this? Now there, instead of hammering on, what I did was I slid from one note to the other. Right? And when you slide, it's more like your voice. Ah, right? You don't actually hit the notes as separate sounds. You kind of blend them together. And then, instead of hammering on, slide. That's a real common phrase in blues, in jazz. Now, another way to blend the notes together is to bend. Now, some of the common bends that you hear in the blues scale are bending from the 7th up to the octave. It's probably the most common bend of all, bending from the 4th up to the 5th, or bending just a half step. Now, a bend that you may not notice that I'm using a lot is this one right here. Now, that is really a blues bend right there. What I'm playing is the 3rd of the scale, the root, the 3rd, right? But instead of playing that note right there, I'm playing that note. Now, it's not quite there. It's not there. It's halfway in between. That is the blues. That's a blue note. Practically every player you ever hear play the blues is going to use that particular note in every octave. Right? You have to learn your notes in relation to the chord so you can think, where's the 3rd? When you hear that note, give it that little twist, right? Now, we got 3 basic techniques there: hammering on, pulling off, sliding, bending. They all add up to make the phrasing sound more vocal. But rather than me show you a bunch of licks and have you memorize them, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it the authentic way. Blues players throughout history have always learned from each other by listening. You copy. You hear some record. You see somebody play. You sit down. You work on it, you know. Try to remember what you heard. Well, you're going to see it and hear it, and I'm going to play with you. We're going to play with the band again on one chord. We don't need even a 4-chord and a 5-chord, just a single A chord, all right? And the way we're going to do it is this: call and response. I'm going to play a lick, and you're going to hear that same lick and play it back at me. And you can roll the tape back and listen to it a few times again. I'm going to use the techniques that we've been talking about here. I'll use the 3 octaves and moving down again. And I'll show you some ideas that fit in those areas using those different sounds. And what we're building up to here is a style. All right, so let's go join the fellas and get down to it. Watch it now. Take it. check this out. You got it. Same thing, take it down. That sounds pretty good. Let's do it up here. Oh, baby. How about this one? That's right. Here's a good one right here. Go up in this spot for a second. Think you can do that? Try this one. One more. Here we go. Tricky one. Here we go, back to fifth. Let's work this spot for a second. Here's a classic. Oh yeah. Down low. Let's take it up high again. Let's get mellow now. It's got a trick note in it. Gotta hold that note down while you play it. Watch it. Well, I hope by now you got a couple of licks that you like, that you can use. And the great thing about learning licks like that are short and complete, is that you can take them and plug them in just about anywhere. And what we're going to do right now is get you ready to play over that 12-bar progression. This is what it's all about, really. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can use those licks. Now, we got the 12-bar progression we know about. We go to the 4 chord and the 5 chord. 3 different chords, but that same scale works over all 3 chords. That's the magic of the blues scale. Now, you can actually play an entire 12-bar solo using only one lick. For instance, let's say we're starting our tune off. Now, help me out by playing some rhythm here. But play the rhythm for me so you can hear how these things go. Okay, key of A. Here we go. 1, 2, 1. Here's the lick. Here comes the 4 chord. Now here comes 5. was the same lick each time, and it works. It feels good. You know, it starts and ends in a nice place. What else do you need? Well, if you do that all the time, of course, it starts to get a little predictable. So here's another way you can do it. Use that same lick twice. Right, 4 chord. Now we're going to play a different lick. Right? That's taking the idea of call and response, which we used over a single chord, and adding it to the 12-bar concept. So you have the call again, you have the response. Now, does that remind you of something? It should. That's how singers in blues phrase their vocals. They sing the same line twice, and then they sing an answering line. That's the traditional way the 12-bar vocal phrases are put together. So once again, thinking like a singer. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about, very important, at the end of the progression, hit that 5 chord, that's called the turnaround. What do you play over the turnaround? Well, I'm going to show you something right here. It's the simplest possible thing on earth. When the chord goes to 5, you go to 5 with your melody. So once again, let's take it from the end of the progression, 5 chord, 4 chord, and a 1. Now you play that, and I'm going to show you a lick here. Starting on 5, 2, 3, 4. Right? Now when you went, I went, what did I do? I just played the root of the 5 chord. That's the turnaround. That locks me into the sound of the band, and it makes the solo sound complete. Very important. Don't forget it. Let's talk for a second about equipment, because I think it's important. If you're a beginning guitar player, sometimes you can get a little intimidated by the stuff, you know. Seems like you have to spend a fortune to get a sound. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing, and this is true, okay? So listen to this. You know where your sound comes from? Right here. These 2 hands. This is your sound, okay? From here, here, here. All right? Everything else is just how you get it out. Right? Now you got to have something that's going to work for you and not going to stand in your way. There are any number of different guitar makes, amp makes, effects. They're all going to work equally well if the sound is coming from the right place. All right? Now I happen to use a popular guitar here. You recognize this one, Fender Strat. I bought this brand new. I'm not going to tell you what year either. But I like this guitar. It's got a nice, sweet, even sort of a sound that's good for a lot of different styles of music and not just blues. Basic difference in guitars is between single coil pickups and double coil pickups, or humbuckers. Double coil pickups tend to be fatter. They get a little bit more distortion at a lower volume. Depending on your style, that might be the best sound for you. Or you might want a sweeter single coil sound. This is better for rhythm parts and things like that. When it comes to strings, there's kind of a controversy there. Of course, easier to bend light strings, but light strings you lose a lot of tone. And tone is so important in blues that I would ask you to go to at least a 10 on top and down to a 46 or a 52 even on the bottom. Some people use light top, heavy bottom. I use an even set of regular strings, but with a 10 on top. Some players will go even higher, but often keep in mind when a player uses a 13 or something on top, I bet most of the time they're tuned down to E flat or even to D, so that makes the action a little bit easier to play. When it comes to amplifiers, I would say the rule of thumb still to this day is that most of the time tube amps are preferable. They just have a warmer sound. So if you want to get that authentic tone, you're probably going to want to wind up with something that has tubes in it. Very important. All right, now it's time to get together with the band again and use all the techniques and the phrasing ideas we've been talking about together with the fellas. And you're going to be playing some 12-bar solos. Now remember, when you get to that 5 chord, the turnaround, just hit the root of the chord. It's E, right? You can play it down here, you can play it up here. And remember what else I told you when you were playing rhythm, at the end of the tune, where do you go? You don't go to 5, you go to 1. All right? So when you play your last lick, end your last lick on the root, A. And that'll make it sound finished, complete, done. Now when you're playing blues solos, there's something you have to keep in mind. If you're going to play 2 or 3 choruses in a row, it's like you're telling a little story. And just like a lick has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, your entire solo wants to have that same feeling. That's what makes it really work. So don't go too high, too fast. You build your momentum up gradually. You might start out low and leave lots of space, and then you start to fill in the space a little bit more, play a little bit faster, maybe play some more notes, start to go up higher and register. And also don't forget that right hand. The right hand really contains the key to dynamics. That's loud and soft. And if you want to be intense, you don't have to play fast, you just play harder. So if you want to really go high, of course, everything we're learning right here, go up 12 frets, same exact shape. It's a little harder to play up there because you have to kind of reacquaint your hand with the position, but that's all you really need, and there's some fabulous players, Albert Collins, among others, that are basically 2-position players. They play here, they play here, and then they take it up an octave, and that's it, right? And they build careers on that. So don't think you got to know a bunch of patterns before you can play, all right? So we're going to go join the band right now, and tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to play a solo through with the band one time myself and use the same kinds of ideas that we've been talking about. Then we're going to start them up again, and it's going to be your turn. You ready? Let's do it. Well, all right, I gave it my best shot. Now it's your turn. Why don't you step on up there with the band and give it a couple of choruses, all right? Remember what I told you. Don't forget about that one chord at the end and dig in. There's still plenty more to do. So when you come back for step 2, we're going to get much deeper into all of those subjects. I'm going to show you some different rhythm parts, some new chords. We're going to slow the tempo down a little bit. That's the real deep down blues. So until then, keep on playing.